Hey folks, Nvidia's Turing launch was, well, let's be honest here, not exactly well received, and certainly not as well received as their previous Pascal and Maxwell lines, coming out the gate with a $1,200 card at the top end and an $800 card which in 99% of the games out there performs nearly identical to their existing year-and-a-half-old, also $800 card, but packing less video memory didn't exactly set the heather on fire. The biggest problem by far with the Turing lineup at launch was really the price, which to this day at the high end is still in my opinion far too high, but that did begin to change a little bit at the start of 2019 when the Everyman or Everywoman's RTX card was announced and released at CES, the RTX 2060. Based on a cut down version of the same TU106 GPU found in the RTX 2070, this new part shaves off some of the RTX 2070's performance, but also a good deal of its price tag in the process. Like its larger siblings, the GeForce RTX 2060 is relatively more expensive than the previous generation's 60 class cards, that being the GTX 1060, and while I'm sure there's going to be many of you shouting at your screen that the GTX 1660 Ti is that card's true successor, don't be fooled. By offering 3 60 class cards within a £100 envelope, Nvidia is simply dangling the carrot a little bit closer to you, making spending that little bit more seem more attainable. But Nvidia's saturated lineup isn't really the topic of today's video. Today it's all about this, the MSI VENTUS RTX 2060 OC, one of the cheapest RTX 2060s you can get your hands on. Now cheap is obviously a relative term though, as it still comes in at just over £300, which let's face it is a considerable amount of money for the majority of gamers out there. But considering there are still some 2060s retailing for over £400, it's definitely on the lower end of things. Diving into the specs and numbers, the GeForce RTX 2060 sports the TU106 GPU, but with 1920 CUDA cores, which is the same as the old GTX 1070, meaning that we're looking at a 30SM configuration versus the RTX 2070's 36SMs. Now this is a 17% or so reduction in SMs, and we'll also see the same reduction in the new RT cores as well as the Tensor cores. So that's not a huge drop when comparing previous generation 60 and 70 class cards. However, the 2060 has had a bit of a bigger nip and tuck around the back end, shipping with just 6GB of GDDR6 VRAM as opposed to the 8GB on its bigger brother, thanks to Nvidia not populating 2 of the full TU106's 8 memory controllers. This also means a 192-bit memory bus instead of the 256-bit bus we see on the 2070, but bandwidth is still pretty good and it offers up in stock form 336GB per second. Now that's a nice boost generationally thanks to the GDR6, considering that the GTX 1080 launched with a throughput of around 320GB per second using its GDDR5X, while the older 1060 had to make do with a bandwidth of 192GB per second and the 1070 straddled the middle at 256GB per second. The base clock on this Ventus OC comes in at 1365MHz, and with the boost clock it's pretty close to stock, but with a 2% listed increase over the Founders Edition up to 1710MHz. The reality is though that with GPU Boost 3.0 the card comfortably settles in a lot higher than this right out of the box. This card keeps the same 160W TDP of the Founders Edition, which means a single 8-pin PCIe power connector. The MSI VENTUS, it aims to keep things simple. The card's not massive by any stretch of the imagination. You can see that the remit with the Ventus here is to spend the money where it matters, avoiding making this card look like a gamer special with a large heatsink, extended PCB. It's not really meant to act as a showpiece in a neon lit case. And you know what, I've got absolutely zero problems with that. Nothing on the box is pretentious or misleading, and even while trimming off the gamer-esque fat, you are actually left with a really nice looking card all round. There's no illumination here to speak of though, but what you do get is a clean shroud around the cooling fans and heatsink, with clear and somewhat reflective branding, and also a nice thick backplate. Now this is purely for looks, as although it looks like it's brushed aluminium, it's actually plastic. Pretty convincing plastic though if I'm honest, and overall the card does have a bit of weight to it for being so small, so it doesn't feel cheap or flimsy. On the rear we get plentiful outputs with 3 display ports and 1 HDMI. The Ventus uses two of MSI's Torx 2.0 fans, which are industry proven at this point, and feature two separate blade designs. Firstly, we've got a dissipation blade, which is a steeper curve to accelerate airflow, and then a traditional blade to help push a steady amount of air through the heatsink. The heatsink itself consists of 4 copper heat pipes and a fin stack arrangement. Nothing remarkable or out of the ordinary here, but again, why would it be needed, as the Ventus OC actually runs very cool with this setup as it is. How cool? Well, out of the box with the stock fan profile, I run the card through a 3D Mark stress test, and the temperature capped out around 72 degrees, and the boost clock here levelled out around 1854 MHz, so well above the advertised boost clock. Increase the aggressiveness of the fan curve and temperatures come down to below 70. In the same test, while the boost clocks stick above 1900 MHz. There's also a good bit of headroom on this card. Using MSI Afterburner's built-in overclocking tweak tool, the Ventus OC was able to hit an offset of about 110 MHz while using that custom fan profile, and that resulted in a boost clock that levelled out over 2 GHz, with temperatures in the mid to upper 60s. Now you can absolutely reach higher boost and memory clocks by manual tweaking, but as a one-click solution tailored to your specific card, it's a neat little feature to apply and then simply forget about. Taking the overclock above what was achievable with the OC scan tool, the Ventus OC RTX 2060 was happy to accept a memory offset of plus 725 MHz, which resulted in the memory offering up bandwidth in excess of 350 GB per second. In gaming loads though, and even with this overclock in place, the temperature was still comfortably under 70 degrees C while not screaming the case down. So the Ventus RTX 2060 OC, it's a really solid card. It looks good, cuts away some of the more frivolous extras to try and help keep costs lower than other AIB cards, but it still packs in a good amount of performance. It's quiet in operation and will happily sit under 70 degrees all day long. It's got some overclocking headroom too, and all in all, it's really quite a nice card. You could simply say it does what it says on the tin. Or does it? Well, that's not really down to MSI or the Ventus per se, but more that TU106 GPU at the heart of it. Now I'm going to be repeating so many other outlets here when I say that RTX on the 20 series, it's a bit of a mishmash. Yes, it does accelerate DXR features to a considerable degree more than what you would get if you simply turned on DXR with say a GTX 1070 or 1080, but really, it's still just not worth it, with the variability in performance being noticeably jarring even without the use of an FPS counter to give you the raw numbers. But that's something we can maybe go into a little bit more depth soon. For now, what I will say is if you consider the 3 Turing based 60 class cards as Nvidia taking the whole 3GB, 6GB GTX 1060 thing to the next level, then you should be able to judge if the RTX 2060 is the card for you. It is the best card Nvidia offers, for around the £300 or dollar mark, and it comfortably beats out the older GTX 1070 and sometimes the 1070 Ti and 1080 in some titles, and in some it was even a match for my Vega 64. So it's a genuinely good card if we just ignore the fact that we're not going to be enjoying RTX anytime soon. And with that in mind, the MSI Ventus is a good option for this class of card. You're not paying extra for pointless stuff, and the cooling solution it uses is both efficient and quiet, with enough capacity to squeeze out some more performance without any issues. So the MSI Ventus lineup gets the thumbs up from me, and as a lower end SKU from MSI, it's miles better than the old Armour cards in both looks and build quality. Whether or not the RTX 2060 is the GPU for you though, well, that's another matter, but we'll be taking a deeper dive at the GPU itself and how it stacks up in a future video. So I'll leave it there for today. Let me know what your thoughts are on the whole RTX debacle, revolution, whatever it is. I'm finding it hard to decide on. It's a really cool technology for sure, but it feels really poorly implemented in this generation of GPUs, and you kinda get the feeling that as an option to simply try, it would have been really cool, but as a focal selling point, it just desperately falls short. But hey, let me know what your thoughts on it are, and if any of you are rocking a Ventus line card, or an RTX 2060. I'll just say take care, and I'll see you all in the comment section down below, and in the next video.